When we're not working, Stephanie and I enjoy exploring the cemeteries around our home in New Jersey. While many see cemeteries as sad places and reminders of their mortality, as historians we understand the vernacular history they reflect. Like many people, we were already familiar with the old brownstones and modern granite markers. But, looking beyond these, we started noticing odd markers, seemingly homemade. Some were crude, but others were quite artistic. Our curiosity was piqued. After some research, we came to realize that they represent an underappreciated and little-studied aspect of the American funerary tradition, as well as a unique example of folk art. We've come to call them folk grave markers. In the early 2000s, we were inspired to study not only the physical markers themselves, but also to examine the cultural forces that shaped their creation. The first step was to formalize a definition for what qualifies as a folk grave marker. While there are often gray areas, we found that we can define a folk grave marker as having been created by hand, by someone who normally does not make grave markers as a profession. The maker may have been skilled or unskilled in working with the materials that have been used. The marker must have been intended as the permanent monument and be on the actual grave. This differentiates them from the temporary markers used until a permanent marker can be erected, as well as monuments placed where the death occurred, such as with roadside memorials. The marker had to have been created at a time and place where the option of a professionally made commercial marker was readily available, therefore making it an intentional choice to make one by hand. As we shall see, not all markers fit neatly within these parameters. Nevertheless, this is our core definition of what we consider to be folk grave markers. Our surveys found that these markers come in a number of forms and encompass a variety of materials, which Stephanie will now describe.
The majority of the folk grave markers we've encountered so far are simple concrete crosses, often with no inscription or adornment. These are generally made by creating a wood form and then pouring in the wet concrete, as you can see here. The results can be like this example on the left from St. James Roman Catholic Cemetery in Woodbridge Township, which is approximately 18 inches tall and with no inscription. Or they can be like this example on the right from St. Joseph Cemetery in Somerset County. Not only is it much larger, standing at about 5 feet tall, but there's a substantial base, handwritten inscription, and several embedded elements, including coffin hardware and a ceramic portrait of the deceased, Louis Strico, who died in 1930 at the age of 9. While these types of portraits were popular during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, we found them to be relatively uncommon on folk markers. A variety of materials can be found embedded as decorations, which were inserted into the wet concrete. In this example, from Holy Trinity Cemetery in Fords, the maker used items that could be found around the house, such as green glass electrical insulators and a strip of ceramic molding to enhance this large concrete cross. Seashells and what appear to be nutshells painted green have been embedded in the example on the left from South Brunswick. Although the pattern is simple and sweet, there is again no inscription, so we don't know who this was made for. We've also seen commercial letters, such as those used for house numbers or mailboxes, embedded to create the inscriptions, as with the marker on the right, also from South Brunswick. The letters provide crucial information, such as the first initial, last name, and dates. The birth date appears to have been 1920 and the death date 1957, making this a later example of a homemade marker. One of the areas where we often find folk markers is in sections dedicated to children. This is often heart-wrenching, such as this example from Madison, where colorful marbles have been embedded in concrete. Unfortunately, we're unable to determine if the marbles spell out a name or just used as decoration. In this case, we can read the names, 2 names in fact, C. Finer and A. Finer. The choice of the hard, glossy, and non-porous decoration, combined with the shallow depth of embedment, has led to the loss of a number of marbles. This marker is from Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in East Orange. At some point in time, the marker was moved from its original location and was found sitting in this alcove in the retaining wall along the Garden State Parkway when we visited the cemetery in 2016. Stones are sometimes used to create a lovely mosaic, such as this example from Woodbridge, where care was taken to select multicolored stones that fit together perfectly, creating added texture inside the concrete cross. Returning to Holy Sepulchre, we find these two amazing examples of folk art mosaics made from rounded stones embedded into the concrete. We wondered if they were created by the same person, but if you look closely, you can see a definite difference in skill and execution, but maybe one was influenced by the other. This marker from Madison may be the finest and most sophisticated example of the stone mosaic approach. Note the bas-relief created by the stones used for the floral motif at the top. It appears that there may have been a portrait in the center of the heart, which is now missing. The plaque has fallen from the base, and without repair, the identity of who lays below this exquisite marker could be lost to passers-by. Colored glass and pebbles were scattered across the surface of this marker. Though since lost, there appears to have been a portrait embedded along with a pocket watch, the back of which remains, exposing the gears. Getting back to a discussion of shape, here are two examples of a style we rarely see. Despite being simpler to make, we have not found many flat slabs or box markers. Both of these examples have written inscriptions done in wet concrete. The marker for 3-year-old Francis on the left has had the name painted in, which makes it much easier to read. Tablets are another shape for which a form is fairly easy to create. And although we found them in varying sizes and profiles, they're also not as common despite their simplicity. More common are markers combining the cross and tablet into a wide variety of variations, including fancy profiles of the shoulders where the tablet and cross connect. Squared, angled, rounded, ridged, if you could make the form, you could make the marker. Some markers exhibit a high degree of artistic skill. This man is fellow historian Frank LaPenta. He stands next to a fine concrete marker made by his father Dominic LaPenta for Frank's sisters Louise and Mary. Both girls died quite young, one from a childhood accident, the other from influenza. Frank remembered seeing the wood forms in the family's basement until they became infested with termites and had to be thrown away. He also recalls his father using parts of the same forms to make a marker for a cousin. This lovely concrete crucifix was found at St. Rose of Lima Cemetery in Warren County. It's difficult to tell, but it would seem to be a combination of cast and sculpted concrete. Unfortunately, like many folk markers, there is no inscription. At first, we thought this example from Our Lady of Hungary Cemetery in Fords was another cross and tablet. It had been laid flat and was overgrown by grass. Wondering if there was an inscription on the face-down side, we began to dig around it. We were surprised to discover it was in fact two crosses on a common base, evidently for a double grave. Unfortunately, there was no inscription. While we normally leave grave sites as we found them, in this instance we elected to write the marker. This is the only such example of this double style that we have found so far. While the majority of the markers surveyed have been concrete, we do see other materials. We have found several wood crosses. It's safe to assume that there used to be more, but many have been lost as wood is more vulnerable to the elements. We have seen dismantled crosses tossed into the bushes, and all that was left of one marker at St. James in Woodbridge was a burnt stump. The example on the left is a basic wood cross. While there is no inscription on this marker, we were able to learn the identity of its owner thanks to some dumb luck. While surveying at St. James Cemetery in Woodbridge, we noticed a man arrive and tend to the grave. We introduced ourselves and described our project. He said his name was Joseph Stankiewicz and explained to us that his father Thomas Stankiewicz, a carpenter from Poland, made the cross for his daughter Mary, who died in 1919. On the right is a more elaborate example of a wooden cross from St. Joseph Cemetery in Somerset County. In addition to the club ends, concrete base, and crucifix, this marker had previously been painted white, perhaps to mimic a more expensive marble material, which is something that we see with a lot of homemade markers done in both wood and concrete. In addition to concrete and wood, metal is sometimes used to create markers both modest and elegant. Metal pipes were often used to form simple crosses, such as this one on the left from Somerset County. On the right is a more artistic example made from cast and wrought iron set in a concrete base found at St. Bernard's in Bridgewater. This marker once again has those lovely club arms, along with the delicate rays and floral decoration. At first glance, this monument at St. Joseph's in Somerset County might appear to be professionally made. While the overall marker shows a wonderfully creative metalworking skill, note that the S lacks uniformity in its shape. This was a clue for us that it might be amateur made. The floral details on top of the urns have a distinct folk art quality to them as well, but the inscription on the back of the professionally made base tells the full story. It reads, "The top is made from my own hand." Now we're assuming the "on" is a typo. Evidently, Joseph Shuck made the monument for his wife Charlotte, who died in 1951. Joseph joined his wife in 1988. The Woodbridge Township area was home to numerous ceramic and terracotta companies employing immigrants who learned how to work in such materials. This example of a terracotta marker demonstrates a high degree of skill. The inscription, while done with great care, appears handwritten and retains the guidelines at top and bottom. The lettering and overall asymmetry suggests that this was not a commercially produced marker, but was perhaps made by a worker in the plant, possibly for a family member. We've also seen other terracotta examples where architectural remnants have been fashioned into lovely markers. This marker is one of my favorites. This extraordinary example is found in St. Andrew's Ukrainian Cemetery in South Bambrook. The figure of Christ has been painted across individual square ceramic tiles, which have then been nailed to a wood cross. The detail shows the wonderful folk art quality of the marker, which was created around 1975. While most of the markers surveyed fall into general categories of forms such as cross, tablet, etc., some defy such easy definition. The example on the left consists of a brick arch encased in concrete, topped with a cross. We have dubbed this example the oven, and speculate that the alcove may have been used for candles or statuary. This unique marker on the right is located in Warren County and consists of a bench, latticework, plastic flowers and wreath, a metal plaque, a flag, and even a birdhouse. This was erected for John Sanders, who died in 2001 at the age of 86. The reason we know who was buried here is because the marker was constructed around a small metal plaque supplied by the funeral home upon burial. In fact, many homemade markers incorporate these plaques into the final design, whether they're embedded in concrete, attached to a wood cross, or tied to a metal pipe. Speaking of temporary items that become permanent, at St. Andrew's Ukrainian Cemetery in South Bambrook, plain white wood crosses with the deceased's name painted in black are put up until a permanent marker can be erected. Yet some of these crosses appear to have become more permanent. The two on the right have been incorporated into a general scheme of decoration, and the worn lettering is an indicator that they've been there for quite a while. Can these be considered folk markers? Or how about these? The monument on the left, also found at St. Andrew's, was obviously created by a skilled sculptor. Yet, if the person didn't normally make grave markers, but were hired to lend their artistic skills on this one occasion, this would technically fit our core definition of a folk marker. We were ready to disregard the marker on the right from St. James and Woodbridge as being commercially produced statuary. Yet the concrete base was homemade and the inscription done by hand. We were forced to expand our definition on the fly to include a new classification for hybrid folk markers, which both of these examples fall into. While most of the examples we found date to the first quarter of the 20th century, some communities retained a folk marker tradition well into the 21st century. These examples are found at the Romanian Orthodox Cemetery in Roebling and are dated 1989, 1994, and 2007 respectively. All three examples were made from slabs of granite countertop. And the lovely example here was made by essentially laminating the layers together to give the marker added dimension. So now that we know what folk grave markers are and the variety of materials they're made out of, Gordon is going to tell you a little about our survey work.
When Stephanie and I first began studying folk grave markers, our goal was to survey every such marker throughout New Jersey. This, however, proved to be overly ambitious for our schedules. Nevertheless, thanks to a 2004 grant from the Historical Association of Woodbridge Township, we were able to make a complete formal survey of all the folk markers in the township. This included taking digital images, recording materials used in overall form, assessing conditions, and compiling inscription information. Since then, we have also been making informal surveys as we explore cemeteries in other parts of the state. This is usually just noting the city, cemetery name, and taking pictures. Taken together, however, we've been able to draw some interesting conclusions. Data shown here are from St. James Roman Catholic Cemetery and includes 253 folk markers. As our largest data set, it can be used as a case study. Looking at the overall shape and forms of the markers reveals something telling. While a simple slab, box, or a tablet would have been easiest to make, 82% are some form of Latin cross, either stuck into the ground, on a base, or incorporating a tablet. This is reflective of the obvious importance of the cross in Christian and Catholic funerary iconography. While relatively recent examples of homemade markers are found, the vast majority were created in the first half of the 20th century, specifically between the 1910s and early 1930s. Examining our data, 4 factors emerged, which we believe helped to explain this peak. One was the influx of European immigrants during the same period. We see many Eastern European, Italian, and Irish names on markers. Many tended to first settle in urban areas where manual labor jobs were available. We have found that folk markers are indeed more common in urban cemeteries than rural. The manual skills they brought with them or they learned here were often conducive to making their own markers. These people tended to be poor, so economics were likely part of what drove their choice. This period also includes the stresses imposed by the Great Depression and the influenza pandemic of 1918. They brought memorialization traditions that supported a quick need for markers. Folk markers are far more prevalent in Christian and Catholic cemeteries than Jewish ones. Though they were subject to the same social and economic pressures, Jewish tradition requires a year-long wait between a death and the erection of a monument, providing an opportunity to save up. Fraternal groups also assisted members with such arrangements and even provided markers. By this time, concrete was becoming established as a legitimate construction material and suggested an appealing permanence. This, in addition to being inexpensive and requiring only moderate skills to use, likely contributed to the popularity of homemade concrete grave markers. Indeed, the large majority of folk grave markers are made from concrete. In the case of St. James, they accounted for a full 91% of the markers we identified. Even when we allow that many wood markers have likely since been lost, concrete still appears to have been an especially popular choice. Some commercial makers experimented with concrete options. This is a patent awarded to William R. Thomas of Pickens, West Virginia in 1910 for an improved concrete headstone. His design included an enclosure for a picture of the deceased. While it is possible that some of the concrete markers we saw are commercial designs, the evidence suggests that the majority are homemade creations. One of the clear giveaways that a marker was homemade is often the inscription. Even when great care is taken to write neatly in the still wet concrete, it is still evident that it was done by hand. Sometimes commercially made letters, bent strips of metal, impressed letters, or even a combination of methods were used. All these suggest creative, but still homemade improvisations. We've also encountered professionally engraved plaques and the temporary plaques supplied by funeral homes embedded or attached on homemade concrete and other markers. But what if a marker has no inscription? The majority of folk markers do not. They may have not had any to begin with or are now illegible. Embedded or attached plaques may have fallen off and been lost. In the example of St. James, only 27% had, at minimum, a name and a date of death. In these cases, we have to look for other clues. Asymmetry is often a good indicator that a marker was not professionally made. At first glance, to some, this might pass for a professional if somewhat weathered marker. A closer examination, however, shows a non-professional degree of asymmetry. Note how the vertical body below the arms is at an angle. Note also how the bottom of the arms is not aligned. And notice how the curves are asymmetrical and out of round. Among the areas of original research was the identification of recurring stylistic elements. We found evidence that some makers copied overall shapes from professional markers, but also other folk markers. In this process, we have had to invent terms to identify specific design features. This marker, for example, is a tablet and cross type because it combines a cross and tablet shape. but it also has a distinct shape at the ends of the cross arms that we see repeated in other markers. We call this type a club end because it resembles the club suit on playing cards. You can see that we identified a dozen other different recurring general styles. Additionally, close examination of some markers has revealed that the same wood forms into which the concrete was poured were reused and even shared with other members of the community. Consider these 4 in a row found at Holy Trinity Cemetery in Fords. Each has a mark in the same spot where there had been a seam between the wood planks. And notice how the undersides of the horizontal arm ends all share the same slant. Looking at the front of these two face on, pay attention to this little notch. You can see the same detail in the next marker. Indeed, the overall shape of this marker is shared by the other, and the same shape is seen in all 4 markers, meaning the form was reused each time. In the case of one, the concrete was of a consistency that it preserves an impression of the grain of the wood used to make the form it was poured into. Based on these clues, we can even get some idea of how the original form was put together. But sometimes just finding a folk marker can be half the battle. They're mostly found at the backs of cemeteries in low-lying, flood-prone sections or in sections reserved for babies and the stillborn. Now, Stephanie isn't just wandering off into the weeds here. There are actually folk markers to be found, quite a number actually, which now sit in a protected wetland in Holy Trinity Cemetery in Fords. And what might at first look like Sigmund the Sea Monster are in fact folk grave markers now encased in entwining ivy. If you're thinking to yourself that these conditions can't be good for the markers, you're right. Time, nature, and varying quality of construction have all taken their tolls on these markers, which Stephanie will now talk about.
While I work for a professional architectural conservation firm who has participated in multiple cemetery restoration projects, no client has ever hired us to conserve folk markers. And speaking with cemetery employees has shown us that most cemeteries do not yet seem to appreciate the historic and cultural significance of these somewhat crude-looking vernacular markers. When Gordon and I conduct our survey, we note the condition of each marker and assign them one of 5 designations. Markers designated as excellent are those that look almost new. The marker is in one piece, with no cracks or spalls, and the inscription is sharp and readable. Fair markers are those that look their age. They may have a few small spalls, perhaps a thin crack. There may be small areas of exposed reinforcement, but the marker is still in one piece. Poor markers are those that are standing on their last legs. These markers usually have larger cracks, spalls, and illegible inscriptions. Fragmented indicates a marker that has fallen apart, but the majority of pieces are still there, allowing it to at least be put back together enough to reveal the shape and inscription information. Markers designated as decimated are pretty much self-explanatory. These markers may be a pile of rubble or a lone standing pipe. It appears that many of these markers were made by people who had some familiarity with the use of concrete and the need for internal reinforcement for strength. Ironically, the use of ferrous metals for reinforcement often meant that the marker has been damaged by the very thing added to make it durable. Many of the markers do not meet the minimum depth requirement for reinforcement, which has led to its corrosion, but this damage has provided us the chance to see the wide variety of reinforcement materials used, including bended rods, smooth rods, twisted rods, flat bars, pipes, and wires. But examples are also found to have had no reinforcement at all, or to have used bricks, rocks, or other materials, which have since failed. This marker from St. Michael's Cemetery in Fords revealed what may be the oddest, if most creative reinforcement for the concrete. Viewed face on, the marker appears to be in fair shape, but the side view shows serious damage done by the reinforcement, cracking, and a large spall at the back. Taking that away revealed this odd configuration, which, upon closer inspection, proved to be a bicycle chain. Though now rusted, the individual links can still be made out. We'd originally surveyed St. James in 2004. When we participated in the 2012 conference of the Association for Gravestone Studies held in New Jersey, we went back to see how some examples had fared in the intervening 8 years. Now it's been another 8 years, so we're using 2020 as an excuse to go back to see how they're doing. So now we can see the fates of the same 4 markers over a span of 16 years. We begin with an example that we considered a success story. In 2004, this marker was in good overall shape, though the inscription was difficult to read. In 2012, however, it had received a fresh coat of paint and a plaque clearly identified the first initial and last name, though it still lacked a first name or dates of birth and death. In 2020, the paint had begun to flake in spots, but it remained in good condition. In 2004, this marker retained its paint in the inscription and included the birth and death dates. In 2012, much of the paint had flaked away, making it more difficult to read. By 2020, nearly all the paint is gone. The name can still be read thanks to having been inscribed into the wet concrete. The important birth and death dates of 1925 to 1926, however, had just been painted on the surface and are now completely lost. This marker was beginning to crack and spall in 2004 due to expansion of the ferrous metal reinforcements. In 2012, the back and top had come completely away, and the damage remained largely the same in 2020. As described earlier, we had nicknamed this marker the oven, since the alcove resembled a brick oven. If you look closely, you can see a thin crack in the arch. Also, note the leafy plant visible inside the alcove in the 2004 photo. By 2012, the branches had pushed their way up through the now widened crack. When we returned in 2020, we literally walked right by it before realizing it had been completely engulfed by the bush. This view from the side shows the damage from where the branches pushed up through the crack, displacing the masonry. As the plant continues to grow, it will likely reduce this marker to a pile of brick and concrete. Our pictures may be the only record of what it used to look like. The marker Dominic LaPenta made for his daughters remains in excellent shape, thanks to the diligent care of his son Frank, seen here with his wife Audrey, cleaning the marker in 2012 in preparation for the AGS tour we were leading at the cemetery that day. When we returned this year, it was still in excellent shape and will likely survive for many more years, thanks to his attentions. The majority of folk markers, however, are not so lucky. Later generations might just not care, or they may not even be aware they have an ancestor under such a marker. With no inscriptions, how are they to know? The harsh reality is the resources to conserve the likely hundreds of thousands of folk markers, not only in New Jersey, but throughout the United States and abroad, will simply never be mustered, in large part because of the social status of who lies below. We're hoping that now that you know about folk markers, that you'll be on the lookout for them when you explore the cemeteries around your home. And if you find any, please feel free to take some pictures, write down an inscription, and email them to the address shown here, along with the name and location of the cemetery. We want to continue to compile as much information and documentation of these markers as possible. Plus, since it's outside and easy to social distance, it's a great way to make use of your time during this period of quarantine.